Okay, here we go. Just so you know, you're being recorded, so on your best behavior. All right, so just watch the cord. Don't breathe on it the wrong way. You have to walk this way to get out of your place. Can everybody see and hear okay? You can put the lights on a little bit, but then everyone else will fall asleep.
Yeah.
After our lunch, like our post-lunch. So. Oh,
Don't lean on it too much.
Work on our posture, didn't it?
Oh, that's weird. Hold on one second. So it looks right here, but the screen share is actually looking at your presenting. This is what they're seeing. Can we share that? If you stop sharing and you go maybe to this one here.
Great.
Yeah, so that ought to fix it. Is that better?
Yep.
All right, that has done it. I love solving technical problems. All right. Thank you so much. Introduce yourselves and take it away. Thank you.
Well, hi, I'm Kevin. I work at Ball State, director of the Applied Anthropology Laboratories, recently former interim treasurer of the Ohio Archaeological Council. Apparently I need to talk louder, so I'll try that.
Oh, the microphone is, but did we get this to work?
I don't know, test it.
They can hear online because so we turn this on, this will only be for the room.
Kevin, you can speak up.
I will try.
The AC's on.
I mean, there's seats open in the front row for those students who are trying to avoid attention.
Yeah, it's true whether we're talking about elementary school or professionals.
Thank you, Professor Mel. Suggestion well taken.
Oh, we got the.
I touched it. So one to very. I promise we are highly trained professionals.
In a different.
Have we got the? Nope. We've lost. Okay, you're sharing now. We've lost the. Almost.
Got your background.
Yeah, that's weird. We had this working just a moment ago. It's extended the screen. There we are.
The external display got disconnected again.
It's okay. No, it's on. We've got it.
Oh, all right. So let's try this again. To zoom and share and screen two.
Yes, is it still showing up as recording? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now hopefully that's correct. Good. All right. Everybody knows who I am.
Still Ben Ford from Pennsylvania. Yeah.
And we might be joined at some point by Rebecca Hawkins. Rebecca was one of the Uber facilitators for the Airlie House 2.0 meetings. Ben and I, guys are getting a really biased perspective on this because Ben and I were in both of the same sessions together. So we only know a lot about half of what we talked about. I think I know this answer, but how many people here work for a university? All right, so that tells us what our audience is. so all three of the university people are up here. How many of you work for a private CRM firm? Almost everybody else. And how many people work for Ohio History Connection? I think that covers the rest of it. So our audience is largely agency and industry folks. So assume you guys know something about what has been going on. Has anybody ever even heard of Airlie House before? Okay. I go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. Feedback.
Is it turned on now?
That's just the feedback from that mic. I don't think
I don't know. Is the light on? I thought there was a green light on the front of it. Okay, so that's not it. Is somebody else logged on as your?
Somebody's got their sound on mute.
Chris, is your mic on back there?
Pull up the participants and make sure they're on mute. You can do right now.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, if you're online, please keep muted. Okay.
All right. Okay, so these are the sponsors of the effort that we had. The here we go. Okay, so the original Early House was in 1974. They actually had 6 weeks of meetings, multiple sessions with different people coming in. Somebody else is still not muted.
Me, I'm trying.
Okay.
That was me. I'm really sorry.
Okay. So and they had, I think it was the equivalent in adjusted dollars, like $250,000 in funding. And we had basically nothing except for a free National Park Service facility to use. They had really good food. So if you're ever looking for a place to hold a conference, they do really good food there. I didn't prepare for this part because I was going to have Rebecca give this slide. So the topics that they focused on were the legal framework for protection of archaeological sites, CRM guidelines, standards for reporting, communication strategies with the public, engagement with Native American communities, and professional qualifications. That did not work either. There we go. So then as the next 50 years or the past 50 years have gone through, we've run out of those priorities. Those are no longer where the field is going, not what we need to work on. So it's time to reassess. So the new foci that were developed, and this was developed through meetings at presentations and forums at the SAA and multiple workshops and surveys by the Government Affairs Committee for the SAA, I believe. And so we need to identify growing the CRM archaeology workforce, human resources, improving training of individuals entering CRM, increasing diversity and inclusion in CRM workforce, working to achieve better outcomes for communities, the public and society, and addressing the curation crisis and more. Yeah, kind of could have covered that with just at the beginning. So this is a picture of the participants, and this is the only animation in the slideshow, I promise. So there's, well, that didn't work out, it moved, but that's Rebecca, there's Ben, and there's the side of my head. So the group picture did not work out very well, and I had to sign a permission form for that. So there's 43 people, IDS, that came together representing academics, CRM managers, federal and state agencies, private sectors, some tribal representatives, and some other organizations, representation from the Society of Black Archaeologists, Society for American Archaeology, Society for Historic Archaeology. There was a nomination process. They sent out forms you could self-nominate, but they were targeting at hitting about 50 people to attend. So we ended up at about that. So less than one per state it was involved in this, but it was I thought it was a really well-selected group with a variety of, ironically, a diversity in that group that's definitely not represented at the table here. Not everybody that was there is male and has nice beards.
There were some really nice beards though.
So. All right. Okay, so we had 4 different groups, and we were all allowed to choose 2 priorities, and they tried to get us into our top 2 priorities. So everybody participated in 2 of these working groups except for the facilitators. So there was workforce training for careers in CRM, recentering communities, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, archaeological collections, and including digital records, and then improving the practice of CRM. So actually, Ben and I were both in the workforce training and the diversity sessions. So those will probably be what we would talk about the most today, but we've got notes from the rest of them on here. Yeah, don't need those details. If you want the details of how the schedule worked out when we were there, I still have my stuff. I can send you copies. So the topics that we'll cover, probably could have just deleted this slide here. Moving on to workforce training.
Sure, I can. And just real quick on the general structure was that was what 2 days? It was 2 days, and they would basically each group met twice, and you kind of went back and forth, and it was basically just a various levels of organization of discussion around some broad topics, and then trying to narrow them down to like identify the issues and come away with some actionable items. So that was the way it was facilitated. To try and bring some order to.
First session was complaining, and then the second session was trying to catalog what those complaints were, organize them, and start looking at solutions.
So the workforce one had a lot to do with the so-called crisis, I guess, in getting enough people in CRM to meet the current demands for all the development that's happening. So that, that sort of golden decade coming storm article that you guys probably have seen that was published by ACRA, kind of looking at those issues. And so trying to get more folks into the pipeline. And so there was a bit about how do we make the jobs more attractive, but also how do we train students to do these tasks and be prepared for them? How do we make this an attractive job for any student, with some focus on increasing the diversity within CRM, and so some special focus on that. And what else was there? Those are the 2 big things. Were basically training students so that they can do the jobs, and then having people want to have the jobs were the two main concerns.
Yeah.
A lot of words in the slides.
Yeah. And we didn't make this presentation. We got it 2 days ago and then had to try to adapt a little bit.
So some of the things that came out of this. So basically that as Kevin said, the first like 2 hours was just like essentially a room full of about 10 to 20 people, some from higher ed, some from Fed and state government, some from private sector, sort of listing off what they saw as different concerns. And there's different, depending on where you sit, you have different concerns. Right? So some of the CRM companies are convinced that they can train anybody to do anything out there. You give them a person who knows which end of the shovel goes in the ground, they'll train them themselves. They don't need higher education. Some of them were concerned about the things that higher ed is providing to students, if they were in fact shovel ready. From the higher ed side, I was more interested in like how can the 90% that is CRM, how can it support higher education? Like how do they want to lean in to help us prepare students? So there was different, people had from their own situation different concerns, right? And so that was a lot of the conversation in that first one, was people going back and forth about kind of what do we see as the problems, and then coming out of that, we started trying to figure out what actionable items are, right? So one of them is up here, right? So basically an infographic that would highlight, CRM career paths, right? So many students are really very career focused. They want to, they want a job. They prefer that the degree that they get has the job in the title. So like nursing is doing just fine because nursing is a thing and there are nurses. And so how do we broadcast to a rising senior, someone who's coming up in high school, that if you like history, you like outdoors, this is a job for you, right? And how do we capture the diversity of opportunities within cultural resource management in some way that's intelligible, right? So in theory, hopefully ACRA is going to be working on some outputs that are like infographic type outputs that can then be pushed out. So groups like our Archaeology Council could work through their networks to push this information out into the schools and spread this good word that there is in fact a viable career path in this thing that you think you enjoy. So is that fair?
Yeah. And this question, like, how many of you guys in your degree programs had a faculty member who had CRM experience? That's a lot more than I thought. How many of you actually worked on a CRM project during your undergrad? So, how many of you went in with a field school where you sat there in the same 2x2 for 6 weeks, moved maybe 2 inches of dirt, and then like, I know how to do this job, and went out and got lost in a forest and cried the next day?
That's a lot of detail there, Kevin.
Not saying that's never happened to me. So that's the problem that we're dealing with. I mean, you guys mostly in the room know that you get students that are coming out and they're being trained and prepared and groomed to be mini faculty, to do research for faculty members that those faculty members are going to publish after that student graduates, and then the student knows how to sit in a 2x2, and that's not useful. They may never do that again. I mean, I think there was like 10 years between the last 2 times that I was actually able to work on an excavation project. That's partially peculiar to me, but
Can we dialogue?
Sure.
Please?
Yeah.
So I think the problem with that is that many university college professors don't really understand what's needed in CRM. They're not being trained for those positions.
Yeah.
And I understand that because I've had people tell me, university professors, we're not training people to work in CRM. And my question is, well, you're training people to be your replacements? I mean, that's very, very few people.
Yeah. I don't know if for online, I'll try to quickly summarize what
Yeah.
Al was saying. We recognize that there has been a problem for a long time with training but to fix it, we might not be able to fix it right away with the faculty that we have, because they don't have the experience of doing CRM. They never had a class in preservation law, so how are they going to teach preservation law? That kinds of thing.
Many of them have never done CRM.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that actually kind of, I'm sure that's the next thing that's up here.
Sorry,
One of, well, yeah, that kind of, that was one of our discussion items was, we recognize that that the universities don't necessarily have the capacity to do this. Even big probably especially big universities don't have people that have done CRM. Although MSU has just advertised a tenure track position for an archaeologist focused in CRM. We'll see how that goes. It's not the first time they've tried that. So
Michigan State.
what did I say?
You're talking about Michigan State?
Yeah.
Yeah. You said MSU. That's
Michigan State.
just
Oh,
to clarify.
Yeah. So there might be some movement in that area, but it's hard to train somebody to do something that you've never done yourself, especially when you don't know the rules. So talking about forging partnerships, and so having folks that are in the audience here who have done CRM, are doing CRM, need to hire graduates, reach out, connect with universities, and engage with their academic programs. Possibly offer lectures or get appointments to teach classes on preservation in maybe not even in an anthropology department. If there's a local community college that has a history program or a social science program, getting those kinds of opportunities out there and communicating what your needs are to the academic folks.
So when I did my undergraduate, which was there was kind of a stigma around CRM. It was a big deal for a while between academics and CRM. Is that still there? Do academics still look down on CRM, or is that changing?
I think it's changing. So the question was that a while back, when some of us were in undergrad and graduate school, it was looked down upon. I mean, I was actively discouraged from seeking out CRM, even though we actually did some CRM projects in undergrad. But it was like, that's not real archaeology. They're just like slumming it for a while, and you should do real archaeology. So I think that's still there. I mean, I have gotten precisely 0 interviews when I've applied for faculty positions promoting the fact that I know what CRM is. So maybe I'm not a qualified faculty member, but I think I probably am okay. And so, you know, that's not what most of these programs are looking for. They want the research. They don't understand the mechanisms for performing the work, but also getting funding for the work, because there is actually money out there. But that's also one of the ways that these partnerships can help. One of the things that was talked about, that there have been some firms in the past, and probably some currently, but that would, with a commitment from an employee, that they would pay for that person to go and finish their degree, so that then they have those qualifications. So not every firm is going to do that, but with the people that were there in this conversation, there were several firms that would be interested in finding some way to sponsor and contribute to supporting their staff at getting those qualifications. Because one of the things that a lot of people said was that, you know, you get the person and then they work well with you, but they just have the bachelor's degree. And so they can't go off and do field work on their own. They can't write a report and submit it on their own. They can't put in a phase 2 proposal on their own, because they don't have that graduate degree. They probably have all the skills that they need, but they don't have that piece of paper, so they're not qualified to do it.
Yeah, I think to add to this, so my sense is that there's still this attitude among some academics that it's, you know, pure research or nothing. I do believe that's declining. I mean, even, you know, I graduated from Cincinnati in '99, and my advisor put me with a CRM company while I was undergraduate. Right? And so I think there are people who for a long time have been doing that, but there are these holdouts in a lot of places. And there's also whole programs like the one I teach in Ball State that are specifically geared towards producing people to work in CRM. So, and we see it as a real selling feature, right? It's our master's program in the current academic environment where they're collapsing social studies programs. Our master's program in applied archaeology is what's keeping our whole department largely afloat, right? And so I think there's different perceptions of it. And the other piece, I guess, is that it cuts both ways, right? So you have as many academics as you have that are looked down on CRM. There are CRM professionals who are like, you soft-handed academics, right? And so there's, you know, I think, and that was a big stumbling block with this organization, I think, was getting past that initially, sort of trying to find this common ground.
One of my questions is are universities and colleges, are there alternatives like career centers or places like that for getting the education that people need to get careers to start working in CRM? Because I mean, as a conversation is going on, I think there's a lot of universities, like we're saying, that do not train people to work in CRM. So I would much rather leave those behind. And I tell people who ask me about careers in CRM, I tell them not to go to certain places if that's what they're interested in, universities. And some of them, a lot of them are in Ohio, unfortunately. But did you guys talk about alternatives to the university model as far as getting an education that you need to get into CRM? Because I think career centers, I've had career center people who teach in career centers talk to me about this, is there a market, for us getting into teaching students about CRM? Not that they're qualified to do it, but that's the question that gets broached. So are there other models out there for,
So
getting people ready?
for those online, Al's asking if there were other models other than a 4-year, 2-year degree program to get to qualifications or understanding of CRM. I can't think of any active programs right now off the top of my head, but that alternatives to the standard approach to training were discussed.
Yeah, so there's a fair amount of conversation about associate's degrees, so community colleges that have a program. This is something that, this beyond this conversation at Early House is the conversation I've had with a lot of CRM professionals, and my concern always with there is the ghettoization of our population of archaeologists, right? If the current standard to run a project is a master's degree, the more distance between put a master's degree and the starting person, the harder it is. So unless a program that is at a community college or at a career center is partnered, as we talked about here, with CRM companies who are going to provide that pathway for their employees, I get really concerned when CRM companies talk about what we really need is just a field school and no BA. That's one of the models they floated, because we just need people to dig holes. And I'm like, yeah, but then they're like, well, and then they'll go back to school. I'm like, how are they going to go back to school? Because you're not going to pay if you're not paying for it. And some of them are thinking about programs where they would pay for it. But again, there's a lot of the partnership is super important here, so that both sides of the supply and the demand of the workforce are moving together. And I think that's one thing coming out of this discussion that I'm hoping will continue is that those partnerships where people are talking and building programs that really benefit, that we're not building traps for young archaeologists, basically.
And
That's fair.
I'll call it just a second. I had something to add. That one of the things that we didn't talk a lot about it in any concrete way, but there was a lot of focus on what are the key KSA. What does that stand for?
Substantive something in knowledge.
I don't know. Key capabilities that you can do, skills that and instead of focusing on number of credit hours, focus on accumulating experiences and certified ability to do certain different things. And yes, that wouldn't necessarily have to be a degree program, but then we have to also get into the discussion of what are the SOI qualifications, Office of Budget Management, how are they classifying this? And so there's a process going on right now to look at SOI quals and to reassess. And RPA is broadening their definition of what an archaeologist is and who can participate in the professional organization. So those are things that we need to keep talking about and need to keep pushing for, having reasonable standards that exist that can be verified, but not necessarily a structured 6-year, 5-year program going straight through. If you can pick up certified credentials, certified skills with a partner firm and a partner university, then you can get credits for those, or you can get some kind of certificate for that to document that. It doesn't have to be a 4-year bachelor's degree. You can still learn all these skills. And if that's what you want to do, you just want to be a shovel bum, then that's great. You don't need to go to a 4-year school in my opinion. And you definitely don't need that 6-week field school in a 2x2.
Or if you want to be just geophysical specialist, which is very lacking, that would be another one. So
We had somebody else who had a question.
sorry, Chris.
In the chat, there was a statement. If you want to pull the chat up real quick, you can read it from Nancy White.
I can find
So,
them.
If it's too complicated, we can read it.
it basically says, I'm not in Ohio anymore, but my university and their department does train students for CRM. Our problem is that the companies offering internships pay so poorly, students aren't that interested. One company just contacted me, running a partnership and seeking student interns who would be paid between $10 and $12 an hour.
You probably rethink that.
Yeah.
Sheets pays.
But does
15.
that internship promise for that firm, does it promise a job after the internship?
I mean, that was Al said to add on top of that, that, does that come with a guarantee from the firm that they will offer employment after an internship? And that was something that was discussed, but that's going to have to be an individual thing. I mean, a small firm could host an intern for a semester, but then guaranteeing that they're going to be able to offer full-time employment to that person when they get out before they've ever even worked with them. That's a hard sell for me. So, it is difficult to do that, but you can look at those things one-on-one. And, anybody wants to partner with a university, I'm more than happy to talk about it. Okay.
One of the points that I heard emphasized that the Early House 2.0 number of speakers, including Rebecca Hawkins, were distinguishing sort of the essence of CRM versus essence of academic research. That with CRM, we're looking at compliance and sufficiency. And sufficiency is kind of subjective. Looking at something that is good in terms of academics can be published. Seeing lots of CRM reports that just aren't good. We get across to people, good isn't just mechanical. And how to do that, and this sort of thing. So things like, again, the points that Rebecca was emphasizing. Is this excessively offensive to indigenous populations? Is this something that conveys to people that their voices are being heard? There's this whole idea of engagement when CRM is focused on a time constraint, on a specific bounded area and about compliance. How do we begin building these kind of bridges rather than trying to say this one should subsume, this one can just be ignored or whatever we're looking at? It's a different focus toward the future.
But that was pretty wide ranging. So I'm gonna try to summarize. And so I think it was about making connections beyond just doing rote technical reports, and how to incorporate higher quality pure research into some CRM reports. But then also, how do you engage with communities in the process on a budget, on a timeline, and when you're the last person called to the crime scene when they're already trying to take away the crime scene tape. So is that reasonably accurate? Okay. I mean, we did talk about some of that a decent amount, particularly, one of the pieces in that is that you have to get the federal agencies involved in changing how they approach it. We're not going to solve it because we are the last ones called. And so we can't say start consultation with the tribes 2 years ago. But the federal agencies should be saying that. That's what they need to be doing. And kind of to bridge on to the other session that Ben and I were in is, also reaching out, having requirements for federal agencies to have their applicants for permits reach out to other communities and not just at the mandated when you have to have a public notice posted in the newspaper. Nobody gets the newspaper, so nobody's going to see those things. So you have to have policies at the agencies, at the SHPOs, to reach out to communities proactively. Think about, if it's a highway that's going to be expanded next to an African-American cemetery, you don't reach out to the tribes first on that. You probably want to find a local group that has a connection to that cemetery, to that community in some way, and get them engaged in the planning up front. And that's not, I mean, in most cases, we aren't in this room are not going to be the ones that are managing that consultation. We're not going to be doing it. We can make recommendations if they do reach out to us at the beginning, but we can't drive that process because we have to work within the framework of the agency.
So just that one thing that we're seeing in this conversation that also occurred at the workshop is that, you know, they had these 4 kind of nice, neat bins, but as people started to talk, the bins bleed into each other. So, you know, three of the 4 bins are, you know, workforce development, sort of DEI, community considerations, and then sort of a somewhat nebulous sort of how do we improve the overall 106 process, essentially. And all 3 of those tie in here because there was, you know, it's how do you approach academic versus CRM archaeology, but then also, you know, bringing in, maintaining the fairly sacred relationship between indigenous communities and the federal government, but then also bringing more communities into that. But then how do you do that? And one of the groups starts talking with the sort of streamlining group was talking about, you know, can we use parts of NEPA that have a pretty good outreach, or at least relatively good outreach, and then, you know, use that, have more of sort of the section 110 component of things to know better what's out there, and then still have 106, which is everyone's primary sort of guiding light, still weave through this so that you're bringing more communities in, you know more about what you're working with, and you still have a clear process, right? And so some of these questions begin to overlap, and I think that's going to be interesting as the working groups move forward. Like, how do they pull that power together as opposed to being these different bins, because it's still pretty binny is the way it feels.
Well, I was just gonna say, so, I mean, I've been involved in CRM since 1976. Because when I went to graduate school at Ball State, we actually had a faculty member who started doing CRM work. And I participated in a couple of CRM projects, Ron Hicks. So, and I was like one of the guinea pigs back then in the CRM program at Ball State, which eventually leads to where Kevin is now. But I found that interacting with SHPOs hold a critical position in all this, because, but when I talk to the advisory council people, they always tell me Section 106 falls back on the federal agencies. And I always tell them, but when I talk to the federal agencies, they always tell me they rely upon what SHPO says. So you got this thing going back and forth. Nobody's taking responsibility for, you know, for getting things done, doing things right. So I really think there needs to be kind of a meeting of minds between the council, the SHPOs, I'll include the federally recognized tribes, and state agencies, because I mean, I see the CRM firms are, you know, they're just carrying out what needs to be done. I wouldn't even say to the best they can, but you know, they're carrying out what needs to be done. But as far as standards and guidelines and what's acceptable, you know, good quality work, et cetera, it relies upon the agencies to make sure that's being done. And like I said, the advisory council always tells me, you know, they're doing this with this USDA project that we're dealing with, and another project that's coming up. Oh, well, that's the federal agency's responsibility. What's a reasonable and good faith effort to identify historic properties? The advisory council issues some policies, some guidelines, but it all falls back on the federal agency. A lot of these agencies have no freaking idea, you know, and they'll rely upon their contractors, or the private clients who rely upon their contractors, private applicants for federal assistance to do the work. So, you know, I really think there needs to be more consultation between the agencies on these things to improve CRM qualitatively and quantitatively.
So Al was just saying that the agencies are letting us all down. The short version. There was some discussion about that too, and I don't remember any. I think it was only on the first day that I remember Josh talking about this. But the NPS hasn't updated their standards and guidelines for archaeology since the 90s. And so there've been some rumblings that they need to do that, but they haven't quite started. And so, you know, any NPS contacts that you have, start pressuring them, saying, this is what we need. We need this actual guidance from you. We need you to encourage other federal agencies to use your standards so that we don't have the USDA saying, well, we're not going to give you a grant until you complete 106, but it's like, it's not a 106 project until you give us the money. So you can't, you have to, it's not an undertaking, and you're supposed to do the clearance process, and then it becomes an undertaking and you don't do it. Anyway, I don't work with them very much. Rambling.
What else we have?
Rather.
Like Kevin said, this is a magical slide deck. It's sort of a surprise every time.
See. All right, summary of observations from this. Yeah, so I guess this is actually a reasonably cogent summary of what the discussion we've been having here. That you know, we all have responsibilities for this. We have, the academics need to be focusing on where the jobs actually are. And yes, people are still saying, it's not my job to prepare people for CRM jobs. It's like, okay, what job are you preparing them for? Because there aren't faculty positions. We're not getting more museum curators. There's a very finite pool here that's shrinking. If you're not preparing them for CRM, you're not doing your job. Go tell your president and the provost that you don't want to prepare your anthropology students for a job, and see how long you have an anthropology program. So that's what we need. Whether you're comfortable with it, whether you think that's the right thing for your department, that is what is going on. You have to have some familiarity with CRM. You have to be introducing your students to this, or you're not educating your students for a career.
So
It's
how
a
does
nice
it work?
liberal arts fun degree and not something that's terribly useful. So we have to be, sorry.
So how does that go over with your universities?
If I tell them that I'm preparing people for careers, I get money.
Okay, then,
Same. Yeah, I mean, so, and that's one of the outcomes of this is that, you know, Kevin and myself and about 20 some odd people who are involved with, you know, all the way from community colleges through regional sort of comprehensive to some of the big schools like Florida and Maryland that have programs around this, are working on op-ed essentially that's aimed at upper level administrators to make this case that basically these programs have high employment rates for students, which is a number they care about, have higher enrollments than average, which is a number they really care about because the students are little dollar signs wandering around, and that they also bring in external funds, right? And so that all of the metrics that universities currently are concerned with, because they're all facing declining numbers and declining incomes, these types of programs that are preparing students for work are doing, I got yelled at for saying better, but are doing well in those metrics and not comparing ourselves to the other programs that don't. And so, yeah, so it's a winning argument.
so, sorry, I don't mean to dominate the discussion here, but so was there any talk about online programs in this discussion? Because full disclosure, my niece is chair of the Department of Anthropology at the University of Maryland, and they have an online public archaeology program.
They do.
And we've had some real frank discussions about this because I'm not a big fan of those. They really don't train people to work in the field and be able to do anything. They train people to become, you know, managers and things like that. And I don't think that's what's needed in
Well,
CR.
Well, I mean, so there's a handful of programs like that. And if they only take folks who have been doing CRM and have been field directors, so they have some notion besides their individual holes for several years, and provide them the legal context and the managerial context, I got no complaint with that. If they take somebody straight out of undergrad who maybe has a field school and has them do this, then they're preparing that person for a lot of bumps along the way, right? And so I think there's room, just like there's room for different ways to train field techs, there's room for different ways to do this. But on the academic side, we got to be careful that we're not building traps for young archaeologists, right? That we're not letting the fact that we need students drive bad decision. Right. And our program at IUP is intentionally an in-person program for that reason, but we have constant pressure to think about, well, maybe you could offer, a certificate that was all online, right? Because it opens up a bigger market. Right.
Well, and I think that also gets at the difference between focusing just on that final piece of paper you get at the end of 4 or 6 years and the skills. And so if it is a skill that you can get fully acquainted with by reading and listening to lectures and participating in discussions, that's fine to do online. And so, a program like Maryland's Johns Hopkins has one like that now too. And I was looking at it and I'm like, who do you have that actually has done CRM archaeology? I couldn't find anyone. I didn't spend a lot of time looking, so I'm not saying they don't, but I had trouble recognizing it. And so, but that's fine. Like he was saying, if you've got somebody who's coming in, they're working full time and they just need to get that piece of paper so that all the skills that they've accumulated in their career can then actually be used at the appropriate level, at the appropriate compensation rate, then, that's great. And so we're not going to do it all in person. We're not going to do it all online. It's going to be a mix. And I think we're going to have to look at, this is one thing administrators may not like, but cooperations across programs. So you have partnerships with not just academic industry, but across academic institutions where, say, somebody is working for search and they're on the Eastern Seaboard for a long phase 2, so they can maybe go and take some classes at IUP. They're doing something up on Lake Michigan or Lake Erie, and they have some time they can run down to Ball State or to Toledo if Toledo's doing something. Or if they're up on the Upper Peninsula, they can go to Michigan Tech Institute and take some classes there, and they accumulate these experiences over time when they can, instead of you have to do it in these 15-week periods where you do all of the work here, or synchronous with everybody else. That doesn't work for professional development. So we have to look at alternative ways to structure the academic credentials as well.
For example, geoarchaeology, which I find is a very valuable specialty, and there are very few practitioners these days. So I've just had some informal talks about, I'm working for a CRM company, and we have 5 deep testing projects we need to do in 3 different states, and we've got 2 sub-consultants who are in their, say, 60s, and they're going to retire soon. And they can do these projects for us, but it's going to take them 6 months to get us a report, and we need to report in 3 months.
Yeah. So the question was about if we were talking about, or anyone was considering micro credentialing, and my short answer is yes, but that's not universal. But I know my administration would be interested in that. That's one of the things that they're starting to do a lot of, is looking at not complete courses of study, but just focusing on people professionalizing to get them that extra little bit. And so I think that's why we need to focus more on comparable skills. So we need the people in this room to tell the academics what those skills are that they absolutely have to have. And so then we make these lists of things like, if you want to do this, you need to make sure that you get this, and this skill. Here's some ways that you can do that here. Here's another program you can go to get this.
A comment in the chat. You want to bring it up so I don't if I read it, then you have to repeat it. But it's from Bob.
Let me see. It's a long comment. Okay, so this is from Bob Chittister in the chat regarding Al's critique of Maryland type programs. Understanding is that of that particular program is it's geared towards people who are already working in the profession, so they presumably already have the field experience. And so he said, our field has just as much of a problem with providing pathways for field technicians to move up the ladder as with getting students into the workforce in the first place. And actually that was, I mean, that there's actually probably something very similar to that comment in the notes here, because on this part, it was Kim Redmond who was doing the presentation at ACRA. And that was what she was talking a lot about, is that, you know, she needs a way as a CEO or whatever her title is, of getting the field techs, the people who do the work, that are passionate, they can exist in a variety of different environments, but they've only got the bachelor's degree, and she needs a way to get them up to be able to do that. And so, you know, there's a lot of different ways that we have to work to get students into being professional.
But something I've come across too is that, you know, when I'm looking at resumes, I want to hire a field tech, let's say. I see someone with either a master's degree or a PhD in classics, but they've got no experience with American archaeology, let alone the CRM or a field school in America. They don't know the artifact. Like, I would love to hire them. I'm sure they're smart enough. In fact, they could probably start writing reports, but they don't have, you know, basic criteria that I need to hire them to go out and do work. I guess my question is there any discussion about those? It's almost like a miscommunication between what they're going to school for and what they're expecting to get. And, you know, at the end of the day, I can't hire them. So that's.
And that's going to be, I think that's going to continue to be a problem. So the comment was basically about folks who have classics degrees who then end up trying to get into CRM. And I think that's going to continue. I think that's a symptom of the earlier conversation around, you know, advisors not being transparent with their students about the realities of these things, right? And I mean, and you hate to crush some. I mean, I've had a lot of dumb professors in my career, right? Who they got a job doing this shit. So like, why, you know, why can't I? Like, you know, I had one advisor that his thing was always like, you got to pick a role model and then tell yourself if that dumb son of a bitch can do this, so can I, right? And that's, you know, so there's a little bit of Donnie Hamilton, but so there's a little bit of like, you can't tell everybody they can't do what they want to do, but I think there's a lack sometimes of clarity about there are only 10 classics jobs a year, right? So if you're the top 2%, by all means, charge forward, but otherwise, maybe do a North American field school, right? So I think that's going to continue to be an issue. And then, you know, again, just using my program as an example, if a student writes a letter of purpose that's like, I want to be an Egyptologist, and they got good grades, we call them up and say, look, we don't do that. Like we can accept you based on your undergrad career, but you will be doing North American archaeology if you come here. And so they just, you know, and then they can make an informed choice. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folks who want to be Mayanist and that kind of stuff, and those are cool jobs. So.
And that relates back to the one of the action items is trying to get the infographics of the career paths and distributing them, because we need those classics faculty to know that, one, they're not actually doing archaeology. I said that, not but that you know, that if they want their students to be employable, that they have to look outside of Latin and Greek. They're going to have to do some CRM stuff, and so we need to share that information with those related departments so that we get fewer of those who expect to be employed because they went on a field school in Israel.
And yeah, just at least coming to the States, there is CRM over, you know, in the Middle East and Europe and other places. So
I've never had anyone with CRM experience out of the US that applied, but I've had lots of people apply for jobs with classics experience and research.
And so Search actually has a Saudi Arabia office that has got like 12 people with PhDs in classical and Middle Eastern archaeology over there just doing surveys. And they're living their best lives because otherwise they're not allowed to be doing that kind of work. and they're writing papers. They're a trippy office, but so there is these little pockets of this. As I mean, as globalization happens, this might be like one of the silver linings of it. But and just very briefly before sorry, because most of you guys are coming from not the academic side. There is economic pressure on the academic side to take more students, right? Like if you don't have a minimum class size, then your program is going to fold. If you don't have a minimum number of students in a course, that course doesn't run. So universities have pressure to take X numbers of students. Just like I used to have like an STP quota for the day. I got a new student per year quota, right? That I was expected to hit within a margin. And so
with a certain percent retention.
yeah. And you know, so there are market forces on both sides that sometimes I don't know that folks on the demand side of the job necessarily realize. Sorry.
So I kind of look a bit of a different perspective here. Then I kind of want to point out that in the same way that sometimes it feels like academia has a prejudice against CRM, there are a lot of people in classics and overall who feel like CRM has a huge prejudice against them. And I'm going to say that as somebody who actually comes from a classics background. So I have a classics BA and a classics MA, and I have a project manager in CRM doing North American archaeology. I have been turned down for paid jobs because I worked in Egypt. Like that's all it took was me saying I did a job in Egypt, and I immediately got disqualified from the running. So like I want people, there are a lot of classics departments that do a really, really good job in training on field experience, to the point that my background, I came out immediately from school with way more field experience than most of the people I've hired coming from North America. I had required classes in engineering. I had to learn AutoCAD. I had to learn how to use a total station. We did survey practices. Like all of that is directly applicable to what CRM does. The only thing we didn't get that would have been nice is learning what Section 106 is. But most programs don't do that. So I just want to say, like, maybe don't straight up disqualify people from classics backgrounds because they might actually have way more practical experience than people from anthropology departments.
Well
The
said.
second that's a Zionist background,
Yeah.
and also have a lot of field experience and fields.
I didn't hear that comment. What was it? Can you repeat that, please?
So I'm just seconding what
Oh.
you were saying, coming from someone with Zionist background and going to CRM, I think a lot of experience with that work and the survey aspect of things. That
one thing that higher ed can do is help students understand how to package that. Like, so, you know, when you write your resume, don't just put like, whatever, it's placed in Egypt, right?
The word classics.
Yeah.
I stopped putting my Egypt experience on resumes because I couldn't get jobs. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll just say it's just an archaeology degree. And then all of a sudden, people are calling me up and giving me like offering me twice as much pay, better hours. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what I have to do.
So there was a comment online from Megan Bell. She said, as someone who attended Maryland, it was a great opportunity to keep my position as a project archaeologist in Ohio while earning my SOI qualifications. If I had attended any of the other local MS programs, I would have had to leave the field with reliable income.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. I mean, I think it's for the people who have jobs, it's great. I always worry about like the 21-year-old who picks that because it's easy, and that's the part that always makes me concerned.
And they stay home and not have to pay for
Anyways,
apartment.
do we we're past time.
You want to
Yeah.
I mean, we have the room
Keep
and we
going.
have the time, so obviously if people need to go, they certainly can, and we'll continue recording. We can go till, 30 minutes if you want. We can-
So
I have to leave it too, so.
Yeah, so we can, again, another 30 minutes. and-
I guess, so the other topics, we did a lot of time on education, because that's what Kevin and I are most familiar with and most passionate about, I guess, but there was also this conversation around, communities and diversity and equity and inclusion, and how do we improve that? So have more underrepresented populations actually doing archaeology, and then improve the relationships between archaeology and the myriad communities that we engage with, who often really care about the work that is being done, either because it's in their backyard or through cultural affinities. And so there was a lot of discussion there, and a lot of it did hinge on the Native American tribes and nations have a protected sort of relationship. And so not impinging on that and actually strengthening that while also trying to bring other communities that are not enshrined in the law up, into the conversation. That that was maybe the some of the tension in this one, not in like a negative way, but like how do we make that work kind of thing.
And that was, this is another place talking about the bleed over where partnerships really came up. And, a lot of the places that have active field archaeology programs in undergrad are, for lack of a better label, really white. And so, that we're not in the places that the populations that we're trying to connect to and engage with in the discipline are. And so developing partnerships with from those programs to small community colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, and having guest lecturers or adjuncts come in from other universities or local CRM firms, have their PIs come in and teach a course on basic archaeological method or basic preservation law, so that we can deliver programs that are close to where the people that we say we want to include in our discipline are. We can't just stay in our comfortable places that don't reflect the rest of the country and say that we're working on diversity. And there are, and even bringing students and faculty and staff into areas that are almost exclusively white, that brings in some, and this is I'm trying to summarize someone else's presentation. This is not my own individual thought, but there are places that are not safe, and so we have to be aware of that. We have to be, as project managers, as recruiters, sensitive to the fact that where we are having to do the work presents challenges that we may not perceive, and to find ways to identify and mitigate against those, and to provide a structure that provides support and safety for those students and those workers when they do come out into your area, and make sure that they can continue in the field and feel comfortable, feel welcome, and safe when they're doing the work and getting the training, because it's not just an old white guy with a gray beard walking out in a forest. That's I don't usually think about much other than tripping on things and how much techno I'm going to have to use afterwards. But that's not a very big concern. There are other concerns that are not that. Not making productive thoughts verbally at the moment.
Yeah, but again, building the pipeline, but then also the idea of retention, I think, is a big piece of this. So I didn't know this before this past summer, but when you look at HBCUs and Hispanic serving and Native colleges, there's precious few anthropology, archaeology programs. I think somebody said there might be one.
Yeah, I think Alex said that there's one anthropologist at all of the HBCUs that can offer that. And so we need to have those partnerships either with firms providing that instructional support, or other universities partnering with them to provide access in areas that we don't currently access.
So I definitely would like to say something pertaining to that. I agree with that as far as like diversifying the discipline. If you don't know who I am, like I own a business called Archaeology, so it's an outreach program. I've been doing it for 16 years. So that K through 12 is very important, to make archaeology accessible, to make it fun, to make it exciting, to not make kids feel like they can't do it or they're not intelligent enough to do it. So I think that's something that should be approached strongly as well. When you're looking at universities and on that level, go to programs like this. It's been a very difficult time doing this. I've had a lot of support. A lot of you that are here have supported this throughout the years, but it's very difficult. You can't find funding. You can't find money. You can't find nonprofits to partner with you because it's against their policies, which makes it very difficult. You're literally on the road by yourself trying to navigate that path. So I think that is very integral. I got interested in archaeology because I like ancient Egypt. I like ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. It wasn't taught in school. When I graduated in 1993 from high school here at Hartley, none of that was taught there. So I just sort of fell into that. I literally went to Cincinnati for a liberal arts degree. My freshman year, my dad got transferred to Pensacola because worked for the post office. My mom also went, and I went as well. So I went to school for English and then dropped out, came back here, worked for Columbus Public Schools for full time, and was like, okay, man, I've done three years of college. I need to kind of finish this degree. So I sort of fell into it, going back to University of West Florida, which is a very good archaeological program. Maritime, terrestrial, you can't get a PhD there, you can get a master's here. So I'm all for K-12. I'd like to see, support from the field of archaeology, not just like financially, if that makes sense. Not, great job, you're doing great. Like, well, that goes a long way. But, money talks, so when you're trying to develop these programs, you can't buy certain, things that will make your business better and have more of a reach. If you have money outside of your family giving you money or money that you have to go work somewhere else to do that, it just makes that a lot easier. And, I agree with you as well. As far as I've been in plenty of woods. I've worked in 16 different states multiple times, over 50 projects. So plenty of woods where, from Oklahoma to Texas to Florida, all over here. So yeah, you do want to feel safe. And a lot of times I was by myself as an African-American archaeologist. Never mistreated, love everyone in here that I know. I'm sure the folks that I don't know I would as well. So had a couple incidents with some archaeologists, and I'm strong enough. I'll make sure that they understand that that's not going to, go well with me. So I think, everybody wants to see people that look like them, and especially, and I'm not bogged down on slave archaeology either, because our history is much more than like slave history. So we had history before that, we had during it and after as well. So I just think it's very important to diversify and let people understand the importance of archaeology, and we're anthropologists, just the importance of it and what that means. So I'm all for that. Diversity in K-12. Again, what I say is I also focus on K-12 as much as we're focusing on colleges in small or large also.
Yeah, and there was a lot of talk about in this one particularly about how to engage other publics and not just internal with archaeology, not just with the agencies, and Alex was really big about getting out and engaging with other communities, descendant communities, defining new communities around resources and engaging them in the whole process. But also we need to get out, we need to do what you're doing and presenting this stuff to the public, illustrating that yes, it's really interesting, but also that there's a viable path here, but that it needs to be supported. Because if we don't have people out in the public doing archaeology, showing the public what this is about and how it can be useful, we don't have archaeology. I mean, people have tried to get rid of NHPA probably since before it was passed. So there's no guarantee that that's permanent. And so the only way that it's permanent is if we keep the public engaged and valuing what we do.
I'll add a plug here too. So CRM as a field always talks about it's 90+% of the archaeologists in the US. It's a $1.7 billion industry, and those are all true statements. I always ask CRM folks, if it's 90%, then you are the majority of the workforce. So get out, go to high schools, go to elementary schools, for two reasons. One, I try to do that, but I'm one person with one driving radius. If all the archaeologists saw that as part of their gig, and if their companies would pay for it, right? You want a half day to go do this? Sure. It's either that or count some flakes. Yeah, by all means, go do that, right? And so if they would support it that way, you'd have a lot more kids in high school seeing it. And then I made that crack about nurses before, about how everyone knows a nurse, and so nursing programs do well. If archaeologists start showing up at your school, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I actually know an archaeologist, right? And again, just kind of getting the idea in people's heads that this is a real job. And then if the CRM companies also would pay living wage, which they're getting better at, that also helps make it a real job.
And that is another bleed over into we probably won't have time to talk too much about, but in the improving CRM super umbrella category, one of the things that was being talked about a lot was flexible mitigation, and not just like, I mean, Kentucky has a lot of good examples of flexible mitigation that they've done, where they've had public volumes, videos, teacher resources, all kinds of stuff that come out instead of 10,000 artifacts from a phase 3 that somebody has to store in perpetuity. And so, things like this outreach, think creatively about it's, you're going to get more out of having a good, positive public experience for archaeology's future support than you are for a 1,200-page technical report on a phase 3. That's not going to bring anybody into the field. And so, this is, you may not preserve that one resource, but you are ensuring the future preservation of resources.
So in my experience, working in CRM and now retired and chairing the OAC's Government Affairs Committee for a couple of decades now. So, and as we talked about in the spring at the National Register Workshop, I mean, it's been CRM firms, at least my experience, and I only ever worked for one in the private sector. Basically, there's this fear of finding National Register eligible properties. I mean, let's face it, I mean, I've been told we make the most money when we do phase 1 surveys and we don't find anything. That's the priority, So really to not find, National Register eligible sites. And frankly, as you've heard me talk about this before ad nauseum, because we're not doing enough remote sensing work on phase 1 surveys, 95% of the eligible sites. But as far as being creative and effective mitigation, when you find, there should be no fear of finding National Register eligible sites. That doesn't mean you have to go to data recovery. As a matter of fact, that you can do anything you want. It's negotiated. It's a consultation. And you could write off every one of those archaeological sites because you have to find agreement with all the stakeholders. There's many ways to deal with National Register eligible sites. You don't have to go to, a data recovery on them. And frankly,
the only mandated thing is take into consideration.
I'd rather see way more, way less data recovery right now than doing things like creating historic context statements that tells you these are the kind of properties that an archaeological site has to have to be determined eligible, and doing all sorts of. I was working in SHPO. We started developing these statements, what we call the State Historic Preservation Plan, back in the old days. And, they died because we ran out of funding when the Reagan administration took over, which tells you how outdated I am. But there's many different things to mitigate, many ways to mitigate them besides doing data recovery. So yeah, we ought to be doing way more than that. But that's a consultation and agreement that has to be done by the agency, the SHPO, and the archaeologist and the client, and then the archaeologists that are working for the client, plus all the consulting parties that are involved. And in my experience, especially lately, when the OAC has been in meetings, when they get to developing a memorandum of agreement, you get to whatever the mitigation is, whether it's for archaeology or for buildings or anything else, there's resistance basically for doing creative mitigation. I find there's resistance. The archaeologists want to go in and do the data recovery. They don't want to, write text for a sign that says, we just destroyed this, 5,000-year-old Native American settlement, and this is the mitigation that we're doing. There's resistance upon some of the partners too. So it's a difficult process, but we need to do more creative mitigation, in my opinion.
And again, I'll make from the place where I sit, I think this is one of the spots where Maryland's program and programs that train students, because creative mitigation is a little bit of a jargony specialty kind of thing. But if you've got professors who do CRM or have done CRM, thinking about these issues and having these kind of conversations, like I train students around like, you know, that this is an option and that their job is to think about the options as they move into positions where they have some power and authority, right? And we talk about it, you know, not as a 1 and a 0, but like if you've got a big road project that's just going to clip a bunch of like homesteads and we're going to get no information, but they are eligible. Maybe we don't do that. That's stupid, right? And so maybe we go and do, you know, some banking or some contacts or whatever it might be. And so I think there is, you know, there's, to the earlier question, I'd see a lot of hope as we move forward, because it's you know, there is eventually we have to get to a tipping point where more people are trained than not. But I think I'm not sure we're there yet, I guess, and that's why Airly House was a thing, because like, clearly we're not there yet. They wouldn't have brought 43 people together to have the conversation if they thought we were there. So.
Okay.
So. This has been something I've referred to very often for 50 years. The first section of it is really interesting. We have people, the authors laying out a lot of her picture of what preservation is. And concerns raised in the 2.0 is that while there's been excellent work in some areas, it's been deficient in some others, trying to find a way to even things a little bit. And I'm really glad you brought up that slide. That was something I was really hoping to get to, because it's a really good thought piece for people. Take a look at it and remember it. Creative. We use terms in archaeology that most of the people in most of all of these communities they're working with don't use. And finding common ground means we have to learn words they are using, stuff, that's just word, but stuff that they are interested in. We have to find ways of meshing so that we can get across things that we're interested in. Start talking to them early. It's a big way to help. And keep the conversation going. It's really important that we learn how to preserve more than just the physical manifestations, archaeological sites, as we are trained to identify, study, describe. That's important. It's just needs to be a broader vision.
Yeah, I think that we need to do, whether it's CRM or not, we have to stop telling people what's interesting about their heritage. We need to start listening to them. And you know, yes, I mean, I have the most training in a particular thing, so I know how to do that. And I can do that in your backyard or your backyard or your backyard. I don't have to ask the questions. I know how to get the information. I know how to process it. It doesn't have to be my question. I can be the technical expert in how to accomplish a particular thing, but not providing the driving force of the research design or the questions, or even the kinds of output that comes into it. And so if we have to go into communities and in these consultation meetings and listen to what the communities are telling us that they want to know and how they want to know it and how they want to share it about their history. Because what often happens is we come in and we bulldoze over everyone and we do the report that we were going to do before we met any of them. And that's not useful, and that further alienates communities from archaeology. So yes, we need to do that, I think, in CRM, but the non-CRM archaeologists need to be doing that as well and engaging with communities and taking a back seat, or at least being a co-pilot in that process.
I have a slightly different feeling about this, I guess, because I see in CRM in particular, but archaeology across the board, a tension where there's currently pressure to make essentially field techs as just technicians, right? So you just dig holes, all you gotta do is find the pointy rocks, right? And I think that's dangerous, given that many firms are very proud of themselves for paying about $25 an hour. If you run $25 an hour out, it's about $52,000 a year. The average for a bachelor's degree across the United States is 60. So if to be a field tech, you need to have a bachelor's degree, then we should be paying people at least $60,000 a year, maybe with some health insurance, I don't know. Right, and so we need to be, I always push back against this notion of like, we're just technicians, we just do the thing. You tell us what you want, we'll do the thing. Because I think there's more to what we have than, and I always tell students, I'm like, look, if you get a master's degree in archaeology, you've got more training than your dentist, like actual like training. And anybody who wants to go to an amateur dentist, I got drills in the car. I can hook you up, right? And so there's, so remembering that we do have a real skill set that I think is technical for sure, but also, and so I advocate a lot of times for like, but we also don't have all the answers of all the questions. So we know there's some questions out here that would be interesting to ask, but yeah, we're going to dig this site anyways. Let's get people involved, and we can ask everybody's questions or most of the questions as well as ours. So I have a sort of trying to hit that balance, because I really have a lot of concerns about what they're going to do with Secretary of Interior standard and that kind of stuff in the near future. And partly it's because I train students to do this. This is my job, and so I do like the idea of not losing my job. And so I'm biased in this, but I do think that keeping that balance is super important. So anyways,
So I think we might be getting near the end.
Yeah.
But I wanted to raise two things. First of all, how can the OAC as an organization contribute to continuing this conversation and this effort? And piggybacking upon that, we're having our 50th anniversary next fall. And one of the theme that since I'm chair of this ad hoc committee for it, is to talk about basically the OAC, where we've been, where are we now, and where are we going, and where's the discipline of archaeology going? So I want this kind of discussion to be part of that program in the fall of next year. So think of ways, everybody, think of ways how we can continue this conversation. But more immediate, how can the OAC as an organization help this this program or this effort continue in the short term? I mean, what's coming out besides this? What's coming out soon?
is that
About from the early house report, et cetera, et cetera.
So I think there's an outcomes slide somewhere,
Okay, good.
but I'm not sure which one it is. There's going to be at the SAA meeting, there's going to be a couple of sessions, and those sessions tend to be in Denver. Yeah. There'll be a session kind of reporting out probably much more coherently and
Must be the archaeological record. And you have a piece should be coming out this year yet.
In the archaeological record.
Yeah, in the SAA archaeological record.
That's
That's
open access, so
yeah.
we get that information, we can put that out,
Yeah.
there. We can type it through our website and places to put that out there.
And if you read that and then you go to SAA, which I know this is it's not everyone's gonna be able to do this, but that most of the sessions that Early had at the SAAs are reactive, right? So they're people were up there, and I think that's how I ended up at this meeting back in whenever it was, because I showed up one of those meetings and I had opinions about things because it was all old people telling me like that they had discovered CRM kind of thing, right? It was fucking mind blowing to me. But you can go and you can interact. And then through that, I think I'm not sure they're still taking comment or not, but like Ira Beckerman, who's you're sort of for Pennsylvania the parallel, he wrote extensive email to them that they read because I got a response on it. So I mean, there's things like that to actually engage and try to guide it. I think it's partly showing up at some of these things. But.
And it's this PowerPoint, since we didn't go through all of it, if you guys want to just email me and I can send you a copy of it, and so you can see all the summaries that were listed in there. One thing that we're actually working on, Ben's already mentioned it, is hopefully will be in Chronicle of Higher Education, explaining the benefits to universities and the metrics that they track, enrollments, job placement, et cetera, and making that pitch to administrators so that they can support the programs that exist, or maybe support the development of some of these pieces and parts that we've talked about. Let's go to and partnerships. I mean, I don't know how the OAC can be involved as an organization, but I mean, there's a lot of different firms represented here. You know, reach out if you have folks, if you have the ability to offer help to universities.
Seems like actually one way that the OAC might be able to do that work is through a committee that hasn't been active recently, through the education committee, to be a clearinghouse to say, how can we connect our professional partners who have technical needs to the academic side, right? We can, in some ways, maybe be a way to connect that through the education committee if we have people interested in taking on that work, to say, what is needed? What are the state private companies telling us they need in terms of training and expertise? How can we match that to colleges both in Ohio and adjacent to meet those needs, like to act as that place in the middle? It seems to me that would be a really good use of our time in our committee that doesn't do a lot at this moment with education.
It's helpful to have a single institution in the state of Ohio that focuses on CRM. We have, you know, Kevin and Ben from neighboring states who've come over here. And Kevin has been involved in OAC for many years, and yet we lost the only institution that we had in Hocking Technical College that really focused on CRM. There's lots of students that come out of Ohio State or Kent State, and they kind of end up in CRM by accident in most cases. At least that's from the other end of it. It's somebody who's, you know, working for an employer. You know, this, absolutely. We just need to find that institution or set of institutions who want to take on this work.
Or who are maybe doing it, or who may even be doing it, just not connecting it in the right way, to say a small tweak to a program. And here it's like, again, to your like readiness for job training, like here is the outlet for your students who have these degrees, you know, a little tweak here in your program, a partnership, and now you have folks who can leave with a bachelor's degree or even an associate degree and become employed. But to me, that's where I think maybe we can play a role in that.
Problem is, I don't see many faculty members who are qualified to teach any of this.
Well,
I mean,
there's,
I know PhDs who can't even do any field work, you know, so.
I've taught about ethnography and I am not an ethnographer, so I can learn, so.
Our resources for one another in institutions. And then we're gonna have to wrap this up.
During your, you mentioned UT may have something.
University of Toledo.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom Zitch he's doing some CRM there, and I think he's used some of the students that they have, and they have hands-on stuff, a lot of hands-on stuff that they're doing. They're trying to get their students out in the field nearby so that they're not having to pay a boatload. I mean, that's what we didn't really mention, but you know, field schools are a huge barrier the way that they're structured now. During the summer, no federal financial aid availability. So we need creative ways of delivering field school credits and field school qualifications as well. So start thinking of ways to offer those. None of you are teaching field schools, so, but.
We have a field school scholarship program, the OAC does, Kevin runs it. We've given out field school 2 last year, but in the last half dozen years, at least, the only field school scholarships we've ever given out is for the Harrison County Collar Cemetery work. That's run by a nonprofit out of Ohio State University. I mean, we don't get students, we don't even get professors and universities that run the few field schools we have in Ohio. They don't even come to us, have their students come to us and ask for money. So
like, again,
how many of them are members of the OAC?
Yeah, and so I think there's some work there to grow.
There's been a fall off in the number of academic.
Yeah.
Like when I first came to these meetings,
2004,
2005, Mark Seaman would come here. Elliot Abrams would come here. These were all from regional universities. We just don't see.
Retired and not replaced.
Replaced, and for whatever reason, these.
Well, at the founding of the OAC 50 years ago, it was academics that were really at the forefront of this whole thing. You're right. Over the years, academics have, we've seen fewer and fewer and fewer. That's why I won't say it.
Well, as another push, as we think about the 50th anniversary, about reaching back out and reestablishing those connections. I can be quite persuasive. No, I'm just kidding. I tell my students, like, don't make me get mean, but well, we can gently persuade. I think this is a really good place to leave. I know it's just 2 o'clock and some of us have places you've got to take off. So I hope that, I'll stand up for a moment. I hope that we can continue this conversation in these meetings, reaching out to us, that we can engage with this conversation and return to it again in the spring and again in the fall. So I just want to thank our presenters. Thank you so much. Thank you both for doing all that, and thanks to our.
We should get the slide deck to Eric.
Yeah.
Or you.
Yeah, both of us. I would.
To send the slide deck out to all OAC members.
If we can, yeah, if it's shareable. All right, so those of you who are still online, thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording and stop the sharing. And I wish you all a wonderful weekend. I hope to see you again in person someplace along the line. Come to the Ohio History Center tomorrow if you're local, and come say hi to us there too. All right, take care, everybody.
All right.